So, as promised, here is just a video about uh, pieces I really wanted to bring together around aspects of women's health that I feel are really not being addressed. And it's not just women's health, although I will be speaking a bit more to that, but it's also our health as men, as women, as human beings, the health of our bodies, and many, many things that are happening. And what brought this on actually was clearly from my own experience. It's from also working with so many individuals where this conversation has actually not been had in the past with them, with previous practitioners, all of the things, how it's informing so many places in their life. And not necessarily in a good way in terms of, missing pieces, basically, and not actually getting a holistic approach. And so there is a big trend right now on perimenopause. And listen, you know, many things can be true all at once. People in my space know I say this, all the time. I say that many truths can be true at the same time. And what is actually true and great is that we're beginning to realize that there is a deeper need to address the different phases of a woman's life. And as she moves through these phases, right, let's actually begin addressing where there is disconnect. Let's begin addressing where there are symptoms. But what I also see happening is that the conversation is incomplete. And so the whole thing around perimenopause, where we tend to get really caught up in this whole victim loop of like, I am just a victim to my experience, right? Perimenopause, which I do not subscribe to. I believe that we can actually go through every stage of life, but especially in this stage of like what we know as menopause in a very healthy, embodied, and connected way that doesn't actually create all of these, horrible symptoms that everybody's talking about with menopause. I believe that we are at a time where we have the knowledge, the wisdom, if we're actually willing to receive it, the technology, if we're willing to use it, for a greater good, with proper intention, that we can actually learn how to navigate this in a much more embodied, holistic way. And so this is just a big part of, like I said, a much greater conversation that needs to be had. But in this video, I really want to go through everything that's informed me, things that have really come up in, the work that I do with clients, which is the work of sovereignty. And I speak a lot about sovereign mind, sovereign heart, sovereign body, right? Sovereign womb, and essentially sovereign soul. So just those pillars alone are like infinite conversations, truly. So let's just get on this topic of perimenopause and see where it takes us. Okay, I'm 46 and I don't subscribe to the way perimenopause is being widely spoken about right now, right? It's becoming this trend, like I mentioned before, but more so than a trend, it's becoming like this label that gets handed out way too quickly, like most other labels, right? Because often we are not actually looking at the full picture of health. And in specific for perimenopause, we're actually not looking at the full picture of women's health. We're not looking at lifestyle. We're not looking at internal world, right? And the deeper aspects of internal world, especially her womb. Okay. So there isn't what I'm seeing a actual real deal holistic approach, psychospiritual, psychoemotional, psychosomatic, right? Like all of it taken into consideration before labeling with perimenopause, right? What I do see, right, are these patterns. And it's patterns of women who are literally outsourcing their bodies to a system that has pretty much little to no understanding of how would I say, the deeper truths of feminine intelligence, or the deeper truths of feminine energetics, or the sacred arts, right? What does true deep return or true healing models, what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? Um, and beyond simply what does that look like, right? We have to ask, most of all, literally when we are labeling with perimenopause, you know, most of women are actually not living embodied from feminine wisdom. Okay. So I'm going to get into a whole thing here. There's going to be many layers, but I do want to say that over the last 18 years, specifically for me and my personal journey through all of this, I cannot give you an exact count, but there has been way too many. Just practitioners, MDs, functional medicine practitioners, naturopath doctors that I have literally seen over my 18-year journey. Okay. Um, in all of the ways to return to this health, return to this vitality, return, all of these pieces of healing, right? And I can tell you that in all of my personal experience, there has not been one single practitioner, one, that was actually embodied in the deeper thing, in the womb arts. Yet they are informing women's health. Okay. Again, I'm going to unravel this way more later on. Now, it's not to say that there aren't any, because we are catching on and we are waking up. And again, remember, we are going in as practitioners to literally help people, right? And so it's not because these people don't want to help us. It's because there's just this lack of education, lack of real, deeply embodied wisdom, right? Of what the ancients fully understood for millennia, and we have been so far removed from, and is obviously much older than modern medicine. Okay, so there are a rare few, but here are just a couple of these patterns that I was talking about that I am witnessing, right? Especially through my own experience or clients that have come to me in the work of sovereignty that I do. And I'll start with like one of the first things, right? Like women who are deeply disconnected, again, disconnected from their womb, as I'm mentioning, and the body's intelligence. So they actually aren't able to notice, let alone hear the signals of this disconnect. Okay. And I'll get into that more, but these are signals of dis-ease, right? Signals of dis-ease. And because these women are used to overriding these signals because the mind, right? They've actually, really never come into deeper connections with the heart, let alone deeper than that, the descent into womb. I don't know how many women I have mentored and just gone into deep space with where, they've also admitted like they've never even touched their own physiology. They've never touched their cervix. They don't know what that physiology actually looks, feels like, or how it even works, right? We're not informed about these things. And I know things are changing. I just want to bring this to light, right? So these women are actually completely unaware of even like the deeper existence of, I keep saying deep because it does go deep, right? But the deeper feminine arts, right? So how to access through these arts the essence of true feminine, right? How to embody them, how to really listen and speak the language of womb, right? Through these different healing modalities, or just simply prevention, like true preventative care, right? So like, as I mentioned before, a lot of these things that are embedded in the sacred arts, the feminine sacred arts, have been around for millennia, right? And again, we'll get into that. Obviously, a lot of us, especially in my space, in this world, in my world, we know that it's been done on purpose, with purpose, and that we are actually reclaiming this, right? So this brings me sort of to the second pattern that I often see, is just like the amount of women who have like literally how am I going to say this? Have literally not gone into the depths of their underworld. Okay. This is like when we actually go deeper than inner child. We go deep into the ancestral healing. We go deep into the dark, into the void, into the womb, right? We actually go in to heal and feel, not to fix, but to really feel and integrate grief, integrate anger, express anger, right? Because we've been so numb or we've been so disassociated from the truth, right? And we've been just too afraid to look at it, right? So there's so many women I see in that pattern, and all of the disconnect that that causes that then leads to these symptoms of perimenopause. Okay. So ladies, remember that when we descend, right? When we descend, we also need to look at the deeper, like I mentioned this before, the deeper ancestral and epigenetic factors of what we store in our actual cellular memory, right? It's in our DNA, and it's in our blood, truly, right? So it is cellular memory. And the women that I have worked with that can actually take that leap and cross the threshold into ancestral work and beyond, right? Um, there is what I call sort of like another world entirely available to them. Right? It's, yes, we want to heal a lot of those kind of like generational traumas. But at the same time, what a lot of people are forgetting is that as we do that, and it's not just here, like as we become the thing, right? And we are expressed where maybe they were not expressed, or we are walking in a more evolved truth where they could not, right? We are actually reclaiming the gifts of our lineage, right? And we can utilize these gifts. Really, truly, we can utilize these gifts to end these generational cycles, right? In the pain body through the different stages of life, especially through menopause, right? And this obviously helps to evolve our families, right? And then evolve our communities, and not to mention what ends up trickling out into the collective in terms of how we then come into deeper and greater connection with the essence and the greater energetic of the primordial feminine and the feminine herself. Okay. So remember that we are going really deep, right? And oftentimes what I'm seeing is women who've just spent a lifetime either not knowing that they have tools to this, not understanding what depth is, really not like exploring any of that. And then things become symptomatic. And I will get into that as well. So before we can actually claim perimenopause, right, we really need to ask, and I see this a lot. I see women dealing with metabolic issues. Okay. I see women who are potentially being told that they're, pre-diabetic, that they are insulin resistant. And most people are insulin resistant and may not look like you are on the outside, but believe me, on the inside, something else entirely is going on. And so what this is creating is inflammation, right? And what that inflammation is also being supported by is chronic stress, right? Nervous system dysregulation, right? This comes from identity and values and beliefs and all of that stuff, right? And then what happens is like we go see this practitioner, we want a holistic approach, and the solutions that we are being given, even by these like holistic practitioners. And again, I'm not saying that this is inherently bad. I'm just bringing things to light so that, you can then go and decide and make your own decisions and ask the right questions. But we are being given things like peptides and HRT, hormone replacement therapy, or, for weight loss, Ozempic, right? All of these things that are just booming, right, in the collective right now because they're helping people lose weight or they're helping people with their inflammation. And, can these things be a temporary fix? Absolutely. But it is not addressing the real root problem of why you got there to begin with, right? And so at some point in your life, it's going to come back. I'm just letting you know that. So these are more synthetic ways. They're not actually coming back to the organic intelligence of the body. And when we're not getting to the root, the very real, like psychospiritual or psychoemotional imbalances that are creating the weight, right? They're creating the weight gain. They're creating the inflammation because, we have fallen out of harmony, right? We end up holding on in the different places of our body, these denser emotions, and like we'll actually hold the weight in places where we are not processing the energy, right? And usually, guys, like all of this can actually be healed, titrated with patience and time through embodiment. Okay. It's actually by living in alignment with our truest values. It's living in alignment to one's own truth and um, how would I say, and pretty much expression. It's like one's own truth and one's own expression only after moving the necessary emotions, energy in motion, okay? Which is literally energetics, right? Moving those energetics that are actually held in the soma, that are held in the tissues, that are held in the womb, okay? And another pattern that I am seeing is, and this one like really breaks my heart. So, oh, okay, another pattern that I'm seeing is I see so many women who get caught up in the pharmaceuticals, okay? And especially those that got the, okay? Let me speak to this. I have personally worked with many women and men. I'm gonna just deal with the women right now, but I've worked with many women who were, bar professionals, clinicians, um, of service in different ways like this, okay? And who did decide to take the, right? And many of these women have come to me after so much time was spent with their own MDs or practitioners who just could not admit to the fact that their side effects or their symptoms were which were womb related, were actually related to the thing. Okay. So what ends up happening here is that I end up supporting a lot of these women through deep grief and real feelings of betrayal. Um, and that's great because we're moving forward and we're evolving. Okay. And just remember where that grief is stored. Remember where that betrayal is stored. Right. And so what we do is we move into pathways of cleansing. Right. And not just cleansing the body, because it's never too late to cleanse the body, by the way, even if you did this 5 years ago and swear you're never going to do it again. Okay. The point that I'm trying to make is, you know, there's always opportunity and you are not broken. And so what I'm trying to say is, even, this cleansing process, it's cleansing of body, it's cleansing of mind, it's cleansing of spirit. Not like our spirit is dirty by any means. What I am saying is that it's a return to the truths, right? It's returning to the truth and then living from that truth that actually does a lot of the cleaning. Okay, it does. Now, there's other things which I will get into after. But, it's funny because I see a lot of these women who are only like, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years later now beginning to understand the bigger picture. And they are experiencing sometimes these horrific symptoms from the, right? And they have been gaslit for years. Okay. And a lot of them are afraid to speak up because they have to speak up against colleagues or, all kinds of things. And so part of that not being able to speak up is also a disconnect from womb. I just want to make that clear, right? At one point, I'm hearing stories of like their practitioners were giving them these like surface level kind of answers, right? Or just sending them more blood tests, more blood work, more labels, right? All of this is being measured. Oh God, this is a whole other piece. On all of this, all of these tests, right? They are being measured up against a normalized baseline or a normalized population that isn't actually healthy, right? Let's think of that one. Guys, realize that we are being assessed against a population that is already dysregulated and sick and calling it normal. All right. So just sit with that one and think of that right now. So we have to look deeper, right? And unless we look deeper, of course, your answers are always going to feel incomplete. Of course, something feels off, right? We can't just stay up here. We can't. We have to go deeper. Ask the deeper questions. Okay, so when it comes to hormone health, okay, I've been in this game long enough and I'm going to speak from experience and from seeing what, my clients have been working through and all this kind of stuff. But it's really about how you have lived or how you are living, right? That creates balance or imbalance, and it's no different. obviously, with our hormones. So it's things like, how have you nourished your body, right? How have you processed through your life? What are the identities that you're holding? What are the fears that you keep holding on to, right? That keep creating this dissonance or this disconnect? What are the misalignments of values you keep consenting to, right? That's a huge one. Identity. At the end of the day, what I see, what I have been through and what I have moved through and out of, right, is just how safe do you actually feel in your body, right? This is all guided by literally the health and the capacity of your nervous system. Okay. And hormones truly are not what you've actually been told they are. Okay. We have such a limited um, education and knowledge around it. Really, hormones, as most of us know, anyways, are messengers, right? Okay. But more so, they are intelligence, right? They are light. It's light. Hormones are light. And there's always intelligence held within the light. That intelligence informs as a message. Okay. When our body becomes more and more dense because of the quality of the life we choose to live, right? The amount of light that you can hold becomes more and more dim. Therefore, the body isn't receiving the clear messaging, right? It's actually getting a diluted version. It's getting, I want to say almost like a weakened version, a dimmed version of it, right? So imagine a woman in her 30s and her 40s, like all of these sort of like life things, you're lifing, right? And so how are we moving? Are we moving through it with resilience? Or are we completely burnt out, right? So for women especially, and what concerns our wombs, there are levels, like no, or it's like more like a scaffolding of knowledge. I guess it's like scaffolding of knowledge I see happening on a woman's journey, a woman's journey who's actually like trying to take responsibility for her health, right? And typically when women come to me or come to see me, they already know that there are lots of limitations, right? Obviously in the clinical space, but they don't know how to actually navigate the space or navigate the system for the purpose of benefiting from it. Okay. Because I'll get into that later or maybe in another video. But they often understand pretty much like that surface level of womb, as in, okay, great. They track their cycle. They took a moon cycle course, right? They're dealing with the 4 seasons of womb. And like, again, none of this is inherently bad. It's still a form of outsourcing. It's a great first step. But it's still very incomplete. Okay. And so when we go back to the clinical world sustains this perception that you're weak, that your body is actually not really intelligent, that the body is broken, that you need to outsource your authority to it in order to be fixed by it, right? It does this obviously through labels, through diagnosis, through neatly packaged little explanations, right? It offers you another identity to wear, okay? And it's an identity that, like, for most people, it like quietly anchors them into a state of this victim consciousness that I talk about all the time, right? Rather than a true understanding of its functionality, and a way that we can be empowered by its functionality to then inner source and become the authority, or have like sovereignty over our body, right? And again, look, the system has its place. It has its place. Okay. It serves a purpose, right? And for me personally, it served as, yeah, a role I actually really needed to experience to learn literally how to empower myself and how to move through it. So that obviously this is a part that I teach, obviously. So unfortunately for so many women, what I see over and over again is just how easily this becomes a lifelong contract, right? With the system, with the over clinicalized stuff, where the body is like no longer something you're actually in relationship with. Um, it becomes something you are managed by, right? I got to manage my symptoms, right? So when your inner knowing, right, gets overridden by external authority, and symptoms are often silenced, right? Um, Instead of actually being listened to because there's a deeper language that is actually going on within the body, right? It's this somatic language, it's an energetic language, it's the intuitive intelligence, truly, right? It is the feminine aspect, right? This is completely omitted from the equation in clinical space, right? We need to understand that. And so basically a system, truly, that only knows how to measure or categorize or even like control will never be equipped, right? They'll never be equipped to fully meet a body that is designed to communicate or to adapt or to self organize when it's actually understood, right? Okay. So where is this real fracture, right? We got to look at like, okay, where the real fracture kind of happens, what I see anyways, is in this moment that you begin to believe that you are separate from it, right? That you're separate from the body for some reason because you're actually doing it to yourself with the mind, right? Um, that the body, that it needs something outside of you to be made whole again. And like we can use this and copy paste that on like all regards to like healing and the obsession with healing that I'll get into after, right? So this belief alone is what I find keeps a lot of women and people just like looping in these cycles that actually never resolve. Like they never resolve. You think you're resolving them, but they actually don't fully resolve. And there's a difference between, receiving support and surrendering your sovereignty. Okay. Like think of that one. Receiving support and surrendering my sovereignty, which I believe truly like most people have never been shown actually where that line actually is, right? And so it's things like how many of us are told that we're going to need medication for the rest of our life, right? Um, like we have to be dependent on it for the rest of our life in all the different ways. It's like, is that not being dependent on a false guru, right? Okay, so sovereignty is literally about going deeper than the label. All right. We become victimized by the label in many, many ways. Okay. So, guys, we are walking vessels of advanced biology. Okay. Your body is an intelligent technology. And believe me, the body is not confused. Okay. It's not confused. The womb, definitely not confused. Okay. You have to ask yourself, what am I giving my body to work with? What am I giving her to work with? Right? Whatever I am giving my body to work with then creates the conditions of my experience with it. Right? And again, it's like this whole piece around how spirit and soul has been completely written out of the picture. And it's like, I hear a lot of people saying it's like, I have a soul, or no, you don't have a soul. You are a soul. You are a soul driving this miracle vessel, right? You just haven't been taught literally how to fucking drive. Because the soul has been so removed from the mainstream and the body has, been placed into these kind of like different compartments that have literally created sciences for these compartments. And these sciences have been so disconnected from source, right? So they don't look at the whole. So your body will speak loudly when it's being ignored. Okay. It'll speak loudly when it is being overridden. It will speak loudly when it is depleted over time. And we call it so many different diseases. And we're also calling it perimenopause. Okay. So it's like you don't need to rush into HRT or peptides. And I'm sure that's helping a lot of people. And kudos to you. But I'm here to tell you that there is a different way because those things also have side effects. You don't need to rush into something like Ozempic and suck the soul out of your body when the foundations of your actual health haven't been fully understood, nor have they been applied. Okay. And let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about application for a minute. All right. Because like you say you've done the work. Yeah. Okay. Many people say, but I've done the work. So then why are you still feeling stuck? And I hate the word stuck, but why are you still feeling tired or stagnant? Or like, why are you searching for more? What are you searching for, right? If you've done the work, right? Um, I have seen so often in my work with clients, um, and, I've also lived this once for years, right? Until I didn't anymore. Um, when something in our lives isn't actually working, most of us do pretty much the same thing, right? We try to understand it. That's great. That's normal. How do we try to understand it? We read the books. We research our attachment styles, right? We listen to the podcasts. We take the quizzes. I don't know, like, we learn the language, right? We're learning the language. We're doing all the things, right? We think, I mean, there's so many things that we do, right? We think that if we can just understand one more thing, if we can just understand why we're struggling, that this struggle will start to resolve. And I get it, like, totally. Trust me, I get it. Because like I said, that's exactly what I used to do at the very beginning. And like I said, every phase has its place on the journey. But let me try to not save you, but maybe just save you a little bit of time here, okay? Um, Gosh, I was constantly researching, constantly reading and learning and trying to make sense of why I felt the way I felt and why my patterns kept repeating and, going to see the therapists and going to do this and going to do that. And it's like this, became literally like obsessed with healing, all these things, right? Um, and in some moments, it helped for sure. Yeah. Sometimes I'd come across something and think, oh yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Like that makes total sense. This is great, right? There's like this brief relief in the understanding of it, right? But again, that relief never lasted. It never lasted because once again, understanding alone doesn't actually change how one feels inside, right? Because this is a body thing, right? I think a lot of us can actually relate to what I'm saying here. And so, yes, this is what happened. And then this is how this is how I would then move through it because a lot of us, end up learning so much about our nervous system. We learn so much about our triggers, our childhood. And like, what is my relationship to these patterns? Like, that's great awareness and that's amazing. And that's doing some of the work. Yes. And you know what? I bet you can even explain it all really clearly. And yet, again, you still find yourself in the same cycles, reacting often in the same ways, maybe with not as much intensity, right? All of this stuff and ending up often again with that kind of like stagnant stuckiness feeling. Okay. Yeah, again, because we are taught to solve problems with our minds. And so if we take that concept, we also have to understand this at a deeper concept, right? Um, the system taught us this, right? All our culture reinforces it constantly, right? It's literally like, go figure it out, go analyze it, learn more, try harder, seek the thing, seek, fix, fix, fix. And there's just this like obsession culture, this seeking culture of like trying to like obsess over our trauma and because we're such broken people. But it's like, no, 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 because again, this holds many levels. It's all directly connected to these, what I call rites of passage that we go through that we actually don't know that we're going through the various phases of our lives, right? And when it comes to healing, the mind alone will like never get us there. Like it's like one tiny step into a very vast world of something much greater and much bigger. Um, oh gosh, because like, the problem again never originated like in the mind. It originated in our bodies. Okay. And so what I have found both in my own journey and in working with many, many professionals, many clients, many people, is that the real shift begins when we truly come home to our bodies. Okay. And for women, our wombs. Okay. For men, the hara, like, all of these things. There's a deeper descent that has to happen. This is the feminine path of spirituality that we are only starting now to wake up to. So um, when we can actually be present with the sensations that are actually signaling to us in the body, rather than just thinking or talking about them or trying to talk our way out of them. Okay. Because so much of what keeps us looping in our life, beneath the thinking, right, is again stored in the nervous system. It's held literally by parts of us that literally learned long ago that it wasn't safe to feel. Okay. And so real embodiment is, guys, it is a moment to moment, day by day approach that actually requires applied awareness. Like, you have to go and do the thing. The work works, okay? Only when you apply it, right? I see so many people investing, healing, and they're actually not applying like what their coach is actually supporting them to do, right? Once we begin to actually apply, we can actually address and listen for what our body and womb as women is actually trying to communicate to us. Okay. We require presence. And every time you override, example, let me give you some examples. Every time you override your opportunity to speak, every time you override your desire to rest, every time you override how and when she wants and needs to move, every time you choose from an old, safe identity, okay, versus the one you are meant to fully occupy. Every time you override your desire for, let's say, a softer, intentional touch, but it turns into intercourse because you're too afraid to tell your partner that you just don't want to have sex, right? So you kind of do it anyways. So you're overriding your signals. Every time you desire intimacy, right? But you actually don't know how to ask for it. Every time you know just how much you are misaligned in your current job or your role or your position, right? And then you basically fawn or you freeze. And that fawn or freeze response actually tricks you into staying just that much longer, right? Like, you know what? I hear this all the time. It's the job's fault. It's the boss's fault. It's, especially like women in policing, right? I've had so many, like, because I used to be a police officer, lots of women in policing. It's like, it's the gun belt's fault that's affecting my womb, or it's the patriarchy's fault. It's a broken system. And yeah, it's all technically true. It's like the medical system's fault. Yeah, all of this plays a role. It all plays a role, especially when we first start waking up to the deeper truths. Okay. There, how would I say this? There's definitely a process of anger and grief that we need to move through and not get stuck in, right? As projecting or pointing the finger outward, right? This is a level up, okay? Because at some point we need to take a hard look in the mirror, like actually see ourselves and ask a very hard question, a much harder question, right? How am I also responsible for this experience of my own suffering? Okay. Because we can only begin to feel better and we can only begin to evolve when we take full responsibility for our experience. And health is no different. Okay. And in terms of womb health, which goes deeper, right? This is especially something I've seen deeply, deeply misunderstood in not only the mainstream medical spaces, right? These sort of like even functional medical spaces or the more holistic spaces, right? But I've also seen it in the mainstream spiritual spaces, right? This is, again, I'm kind of going in a lot of directions here, but bear with me. Uh, because for one, okay, like women's health has never been prioritized at all in the medical world. In fact, it's always been men's health as a priority and men's bodies that have been studied a lot more in recent, more modern medicine, right? And a great deal of what your MD or your MD specialist has worked on or has been trained in is a little bit archaic in relation to women's health, right? And of course, we all know that this is very strategic, but that's for another video, right? So practitioners very rarely are embodied in their own medicine, right? Um, Let alone a holistic one, right? In a way that actually allows someone to truly guide another actually thoroughly, right? So this, how do I say this? Like this is true, especially for women, because the womb as a whole has been so deeply, tragically overlooked. Okay. And again, I keep saying it's not just physical or physiological. Um, it's way more than that. It's way more than that. And unless your practitioner understands how energy and emotions drive what shows up on the physical plane, because they have first done this work within themselves, right? Um, if not, you are literally being given a half-assed approach with only a small part of a much, much bigger picture. Okay. And so, yes, the journey is a wonderful journey because, as we move through that journey with intention, we unfold into more layers of sovereignty, right? So it's not to know it all at the same time. It's to actually experience it for yourself, right? So both layers, of what I'm talking about here, those layers of like energetic layers are entirely missing from the mainstream conversation, especially with perimenopause. Instead, what I see are more and more women in their late 30s and 40s, early 40s, whatever, right? Discovering deeper issues with their ovaries, their cycles, their hormonal rhythms, right? And being guided and given very limited solutions. And it's solutions that really break my heart, right? When we get into like the deeper symptomatic things, it's like, oh, remove the uterus, right? That's a big trend. And because we're not educated, a lot of women move forward with that, right? It's like shut down the system, right? Manage the symptoms as if literally cutting something out is the goddamn solution, you know? And again, for some it works, but I'm trying to give you a wider lens into actual preventative care, right? Preventative care through the psychosomatic, psychoemotional, psychospiritual that then becomes physical. Meanwhile, all of this, the underlying roots of what actually created the disease, the dis-ease, are actually never fully addressed, right? Cut it out. Are we addressing the roots? No, right? They linger, they wait, and they end up finding another way to literally express themselves in a different way later on, right? And this is the part we are not talking about enough. The body doesn't just break down randomly, guys, right? It is constantly responding, and it is constantly adapting, and it is constantly signaling. And when we override those signals, like long enough, because we are afraid, or we are too busy, or we just have not been taught how to listen, right? The interventions later on become a lot more extreme, okay? We are not, ladies, we are not listening to our internal leader, okay? She is the leader, the womb. She gives us direction, right? She holds the compass, right? But we're not listening. We're not listening. We haven't been listening. Yeah, a lot of us haven't been shown. But now we get to choose differently, right? Yeah, it's been written out of our culture for millennia, but now we get to choose differently. We get to educate ourselves differently. You know, there are professionals out there, clinical and non-clinical. This is a whole other thing, right? Clinical and non-clinical, all the way from like MD to like women healers, all the things, right? Claiming mastery, claiming pro-woman, feminine-led, you know, holistic, and yet so many are running around in their wounded masculine, not listening to their leader. And so many I see working on people's physical or energetic bodies and have never gone into the depths of their own womb. Like, what is that? What do you mean by womb? Right? They have zero clue on what the sacred arts or the true priestess arts actually mean, let alone to be embodied in them. Okay? Yet, there's a claim, right, that they serve the divine feminine. And in the service of the divine feminine, you know, they are serving in divine feminine spaces, and they have zero idea how to differentiate their own energies and entities that literally create the interference, not only within themselves, but also how that affects their clients. That later actually causes further disconnect or dysregulation, and in some, like literally, like worst cases, disease, right? Feminine-led means the womb, okay? We are very misinformed, and it's time to really start asking deeper questions. There are people who often are still unknowingly operating from their wounded masculine. I've been there. Because our wounded inner masculine has no connection to the inner feminine leader. He is taking direction. He is being given diluted or distorted in information and intelligence, right? From a wounded inner feminine that is not in her body, that is not rooted, that holds no faith, and is still being run by scarcity and fear. Okay? And like, worst of all, sometimes he is simply running around motherless because she is nowhere to be found in a sea of literal unintegrated maiden drama. Okay? And this is not to shame anyone. It's to bring this to light. So what we see happening a lot is this replication of inverted patriarchal systems, which we call professional, and for the spiritual space, right? A rebranding. We see a rebranding of this inversion with spiritual context and lingo while organizing it all in spiritual community in these spaces. Or like literally building an entire service and business around this, right? Fraudulent. It's fraudulent. There's no integrity. So, guys, there is no sovereignty without her, without womb, without body. All right? There's no sovereignty without the essence of the feminine. And if you are working with the energetic body, if you are working in mediumship or a, feminine leadership coach or a gynecologist or whatever it is, okay? None of it can exist without embodiment first. Embodiment of the feminine arts, informed by womb. And I don't just mean using menstrual underwear. Okay? It's very deep. There is a devotion to this because how energy is actually established, how capacity is established, the intelligence that informs is her. How we then action and architect that out into the world is him. Right? For me, my reclamation, really, of sovereignty it just began, like, it's been a long time here, but It began with my womb almost 18 years ago. And this is when I was literally no longer willing to outsource my bodily autonomy to systems that keep you sick and disconnected from the deeper truths of my feminine essence, how she expresses in the world through my woman's body, right? This began, my reclamation literally began with becoming a mother after flatlining on the table during my C-section. Thank you, God, right? It began with not taking the you will be on meds postpartum, not taking that as an answer or a solution so that they could profit off my suffering, right? My reclamation continued. It continued with unsubscribing to every way they really believe in preventative care, meaning you need a vaccine or an mRNA experiment that changes the way my DNA communicates, right? Whoosh, and it continues with me building the capacity in my nervous system to not fawn or freeze or disassociate, right? When I actually step into questioning their methods and saying no to their protocol, right? When I am resourced in my body and can stand in my no and simply and respectfully say, thank you. That's not for me, right? So, huge conversation, right? Let this season be about responsibility, returning to the body, supporting it at a cellular level, listening instead of outsourcing, right? And what I see many of my clients come home to, is this ability to hear clearly what the body is messaging. And once you can actually do that, you cannot unhear it. Okay, you cannot unhear it, right? It just grows and it evolves from there. So before you are handed any label, whether that's perimenopause or any other form of diagnosis, okay, know that there are options, there are resources, there is support, there is a much wider lens to look at and question from, right? We must look at all aspects of health and not just one limitation of it, right? Know that everything has its place on the journey, right? As we grow, keeping an open mind, an open heart, right? We being curious, really questioning, understand that you can, as a woman, be extremely vital and healthy and non-symptomatic, right? Well into your 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, if you are taking care of your body. Not just, yes, fitness is super important. Staying active and moving the body in the way she wants to move, right? Sustaining muscle mass, super important for longevity. Addressing the deeper aspects of the psychosomatic, psychoemotional, psychospiritual relationship to your womb, right? Being able to move those emotions and energies through and out so that they are not creating further dysregulation that then creates the symptoms, right? I think that's a lot. I hope this was supportive, and I'm blessing you all on your deeper journey. And leave me some comments, actually, if this was supportive, if this brought you into any aha moments. Yeah, let me know, because this is a huge conversation I don't think we're having it enough. And it's important in women's health, right? Everything starts with the mother, guys. Everything starts with woman and mother, especially in this third dimension, right? And quite frankly, I say that very confidently, despite how it makes others feel. Again, zero shame, because if we really deeply understand the dynamics at a source level and we can take responsibility for what we actually get to as a gift, as birthright, hold and move, right? These statements will not trigger you. Okay. So I just want to say that I'm sending you all love and happy journeying until the next one. All right. Bye.